the bustling, electric atmosphere of a New York City television studio, the live audience of The Frank Miller Show buzzes with anticipation. Frank Miller, the sharp-tongued and controversial liberal host of his eponymous nightly talk show, is known for his biting wit and no-holds-barred approach to political commentary. Tonight, his guest is Karoline Leavitt, the young and dynamic White House press secretary under the administration of President Donald Trump. The studio lights dim and the live band plays a catchy tune as Frank makes his entrance. The applause is thunderous. With his charismatic smile, Frank greets the audience, his eyes twinkling with the promise of the impending verbal sparring. He introduces Karoline, noting her rapid rise through the ranks of conservative politics to become one of the youngest press secretaries in history. Karoline walks onto the set with a confident stride, dressed impeccably in a sharp blue suit, her demeanor calm yet assertive. The audience's reaction is mixed, with applause battling a smattering of boos. Frank welcomes her with a sly grin, offering a handshake that Karoline returns firmly. The interview kicks off with lighter questions about Karoline's background and her experience working in the White House. However, the atmosphere shifts palpably as Frank's questions grow increasingly pointed. He leans forward, fixing Karoline with a challenging stare. "Karoline, let's cut to the chase." Frank begins, his voice tinged with a mocking tone. "Many critics argue that you're just a puppet for President Trump. How do you respond to these claims that you merely parrot his ideas without any of your own?" The audience murmurs, some nodding in agreement, while others seem to await Karoline's response eagerly. Karoline's expression remains unfazed, her eyes locking onto Frank's with an intensity that belies her calm exterior. "Frank, I'm here to speak the truth and facts, which is what I've done since day one in my position," she replies coolly. "I represent the president and his policies, yes, but reducing my role to just a puppet undermines the responsibilities and the decisions I make daily at the White House." Frank smirks, seemingly pleased to have struck a nerve. "So, no real independence? Just Trump's echo?" Karoline's response is swift and firm, her voice steady yet forceful. "Being aligned with the president's policies doesn't make me any less of an independent thinker. I bring my perspective and advice to the table every day. It's about the country's direction, not personal agendas." The audience is silent, hanging on every word. Frank, sensing the shift in mood, presses on, but Karoline's calm yet assertive responses begin to turn the tide of audience opinion. As the interview progresses, Frank's attempts to unsettle Karoline become more pronounced. He sifts through his notes, his brow furrowing slightly as he prepares his next line of attack. "Karoline, let's talk about President Trump's latest policy decisions. Many have criticized them as erratic and not well thought out. How do you defend these actions to the American people?" Karoline leans forward, her hands clasped together, her voice clear and composed. "President Trump's decisions are made with the American people's best interests at heart. While I understand that not everyone might agree with his methods, the results, economic growth, job creation, and international respect, are undeniable." Frank chuckles, shaking his head. "Respect? Karoline, come on. Many would argue that America's standing on the world stage has been shaken by his presidency. How do you explain that?" Karoline's response is immediate, her preparation evident. "Frank, it's easy to generalize in broad strokes about international respect, but let's look at specifics. Under President Trump's leadership, we've secured better trade deals, strengthened military alliances, and demanded that international partners treat us with the respect due to a global leader. Change is often met with resistance, but that doesn't mean it's not necessary or effective." The audience listens intently, some nodding in agreement, others still skeptical. Frank senses the need to regain control and shifts gears, his voice dripping with condescension. "Okay, let's talk about internal affairs then. The president has been accused of creating division rather than unity. How do you explain the heightened tensions across the country?" Karoline's eyes flash with a mix of determination and sincerity. "Division isn't created by a single person or presidency, Frank. It's a culmination of many factors, including how the media portrays the administration's actions. Yes, there are challenges, but there are also substantial efforts aimed at reconciliation and unity, efforts that seldom make the headlines. The studio falls silent, the weight of her words settling over the audience. Frank, momentarily caught off guard by the depth of her answer, quickly regains his composure. He smirks, leaning back in his chair. So, you're saying the media is to blame for the division? Frank's tone is incredulous, but there's a hint of respect now in his voice, a recognition of Karoline's adept handling of his provocations. Karoline doesn't miss a beat. I'm saying that everyone, including the media, has a role to play in how we perceive and react to each other. It's easy to point fingers, Frank, but it's harder to look at the nuances and acknowledge our collective responsibility. The audience, once divided, begins to show signs of appreciation for her thoughtful responses. Applause breaks out, some standing, impressed by her poise and depth. The momentum in the studio has shifted. Frank, sensing the change in the audience's reaction, less hostile, more thoughtful, adjusts his approach. He leans forward, the tone of his question softening. Karoline, you've handled the heat well tonight. Let's shift to something a bit more personal. How do you manage the pressure of being the White House press secretary, especially being one of the youngest ever and in such a polarized environment? Karoline's expression softens, showing a glimpse of vulnerability that hadn't been visible before. Thank you, Frank. It's certainly not easy. The pressure is immense, and the stakes are incredibly high. But I believe in the work we're doing. I stay focused on why I took this job, to serve the country and help communicate policies that I truly believe will benefit it. The audience reacts with a mix of nods and murmurs of approval. Frank nods thoughtfully, his demeanor reflecting a newfound respect. Now, Karoline, dealing with constant scrutiny must be tough. How do you handle mistakes, either personal ones or the administration's? Karoline pauses, considering her response. Mistakes are inevitable, we're all human. What's important is how we handle them. I believe in owning up to them, learning from them, and ensuring they don't happen again. As for the administration, it's about being transparent and corrective when necessary. The conversation deepens, with Frank exploring more about Karoline's personal motivations, her thoughts on leadership, and her visions for America's future. The discussion reveals not just a spokesperson, but a thoughtful individual committed to her role amidst tremendous challenges. As the interview nears its end, Frank's final question is reflective. Karoline, after such a heated start to our conversation, what would you say is the biggest misconception people have about you? Karoline takes a moment before answering, her gaze sweeping over the audience. Perhaps that I don't have my own voice. While my job is to represent President Trump and his administration, I am not without my own thoughts and opinions. I strive to bring integrity and authenticity to everything I do, and I hope that came through tonight. The audience's reaction is overwhelmingly positive, with applause echoing through the studio. Frank, usually the provocateur, finds himself in the rare position of being somewhat humbled. Karoline, thank you for being here tonight and for sharing your insights. It's been a compelling evening. As the show wraps up, the audience is abuzz with conversation. People are reevaluating their impressions, some swayed by Karoline's articulation and candor. Outside the studio, social media is lit up with discussions about the interview. Clips and quotes circulate, sparking debates and discussions across various platforms. The narrative is no longer about a puppet, but about a capable, articulate press secretary who held her own on one of the toughest platforms. In the days following the interview on The Frank Miller Show, the media landscape buzzes with analyses and replays of Karoline's performance. Commentators across the political spectrum dissect her responses, some with grudging respect, others with continued skepticism. Meanwhile, Frank Miller finds himself reflecting on the interview more than usual. His show had always thrived on stoking the flames of controversy and confrontation, but Karoline Leavitt's appearance had sparked a different kind of discussion, one that veered towards understanding and respect rather than conflict. At a popular morning news show, the hosts are joined by a panel of political analysts discussing the ramifications of the interview. Karoline Leavitt's handling of Frank Miller's provocations was not just about defending President Trump. One analyst notes, it was a display of her own competence and resilience, qualities that speak volumes in today's political climate. Social media, too, plays a critical role in shaping the public's perception post-show. Hashtags about Karoline's responses trend, with many users expressing surprise at her depth and articulateness. Memes portraying her calm demeanor in the face of Frank's challenging questions go viral, further cementing her image as a formidable press secretary. In response to the overwhelming public reaction, Karoline's team decides to capitalize on the momentum. They schedule a series of appearances and interviews, aiming to humanize her further and showcase her policy understanding and commitment to the administration's goals. One such appearance is on a well-known political podcast, where Karoline delves deeper into her personal journey and professional ethos. My role is often seen through the lens of controversy and confrontation, she shares. But at its core, it's about public service, about making sure that the government's message and actions are communicated clearly and effectively to the people. Back in the studio, Frank reviews footage of the interview, analyzing his own performance as much as Karoline's. His producer, a longtime collaborator, joins him in the control room. You know, Frank, that was one of your best interviews yet. You pushed, but you also listened. It showed a different side of you. Frank nods pensively. Yeah, it was different. Makes you think about the role we play in all this media, politics, public perception. We have more power than we sometimes realize in shaping these conversations. The producer smiles. Exactly. It's not just about the hard questions, but also about how we engage with the answers. Karoline's poised responses and the audience's reaction might just be a turning point for us in how we approach political figures on the show. As the political landscape continues to buzz about the interview, other media personalities start to reflect on their own approaches to political discourse. A shift begins, subtle at first, towards more nuanced and respectful conversations, influenced by the public's positive reception to the sincerity and depth shown during Karoline's interview. As the ripples from Karoline Leavitt's interview on The Frank Miller Show continue to spread, the broader impact on political communication and media engagement becomes increasingly evident. Universities and colleges with journalism and political science programs start to include the interview as a case study in both the power of media and the evolution of public relations strategies within the political sphere. Karoline, meanwhile, finds herself at the center of a newfound respect among both her peers and the public. Invitations to speak at various civic and academic events pour in, offering her platforms to further articulate her views and the administration's policies without the confrontational backdrop of a talk show. At one such event, a university seminar attended by students and faculty, Karoline discusses the role of a press secretary in modern politics. Transparency and accountability, she explains, are not just buzzwords but essential pillars of democracy. My job is to bridge the gap between the government and the public, ensuring that both sides are heard and understood. Back at the television studio, Frank Miller and his team deliberate over future shows. The positive feedback from Karoline's interview prompts a strategic rethink. They begin to explore formats that allow for deeper, more substantive discussions with political figures, moving slightly away from pure confrontation. The audience's reaction was a wake-up call. Frank admits during a production meeting, they're looking for more than just sound bites and zingers. They want to understand, to get beneath the surface of these political debates. In the media, editorial columns and think pieces praise the shift towards more meaningful political discourse. Karoline Leavitt's interview may well mark a turning point in how political figures are questioned and portrayed in the media. One columnist writes, "It shows that the audience might be more receptive to depth and nuance than many pundits assume." The administration also takes note of Karoline's increased stature and effectiveness. The president, impressed by her handling of the media storm, increases her responsibilities, giving her a more prominent role in shaping public messaging and outreach. Months later, as the political season heats up, Karoline's poise and clarity become key assets for the administration. Her ability to articulate complex policies in relatable terms helps to sway public opinion and clarify misconceptions about the administration's goals and actions. Reflecting on her journey, Karoline feels a deep sense of responsibility. This isn't just about defending policies or a president. She shares in an interview with a major news network. It's about fostering a well-informed public, which is the cornerstone of any functioning democracy. As for Frank Miller, he continues to host influential figures, but with a renewed focus on facilitating discussions that are not only insightful but also respectful, proving that even the most seasoned of media personalities can adapt and respond to the public's evolving expectations. The story of Karoline Leavitt's transformative interview serves as a testament to the potential for media to not only challenge but also to change, to educate, and to bridge divides in an era of polarized politics.